Shabbat Shalom. For those of you who are coming in, Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. Hi, Jay. Hi, Beth. Great to see you. Hi, Asher Chaim. I haven't seen you in a while. Hi, Nehemiah. Wow. Great to see you so early in the morning. Alana. Bob, good morning. Neil. Wow. Alan and Neva. I love seeing you in the box together. Hi. Hold on one second. Did you want to position yourself downstairs or you want to stay up here?
Either way.
Just find any room. Anywhere you want to go. Oh, you know what? Sorry, I'll be right there. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Go in Jeff's office.
Jeff's office.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. All right. We're going to start because there's so much to do as usual, and we have to end a little bit early because we're going across the street to live services, which is exciting. It's all exciting. It's sort of it's a really new kind of, modes of prayer are entirely new, or at least that's the way it feels like to me. Okay, so let's do the bracha before Torah study. Unfortunately, we couldn't find the slide this morning. So if someone wants to volunteer, feels comfortable doing it. Okay, Asher Chaim. If we could unmute Asher Chaim. Thank you.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen. Amen. So the blessing over engaging or soaking in Torah. And I love what happens in this Zoom room when we engage in Torah, because I feel like always new insights bubble up, things that I couldn't even imagine beforehand. So as I usually say, before we dive in, let's just, I love participation. And if people could keep comments as concise and clear as possible, and sort of cite a piece of text or a comment by somebody else, just start with a text, which is either a voice in the room or a voice from the past. Okay, I think we're ready to roll. We're doing today, you want the source sheet link. That's why you're both raising your hands, Asher Chaim and Jay. It should be in the chat. I think Ari just dropped it in. And Ari, thank you for doing all the behind the scenes work. It's there? Yes? Good, excellent. All right. Today we're doing the daughters of Tzlofchad, the 5 extraordinary sisters that come forward and state their case, lay their case before Moshe and the whole congregation of Israel. And then we're going to, hopefully we'll get there, look a bit at Moshe and his transmission moment, just so you know what's coming up. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and we will start studying, diving into Torah. Okay, let's see. Yes, successful? Excellent. So I called this, my theme today, Making the Promise Real. Okay. I'll start reading and then I'll ask for readers so my voice doesn't get too tired. But, the more I study this, sorry, I'm just trying to get things out of the way so I can read this. The more I study this passage, the more I feel like there's so much in here. So I'm really excited to do this with all of you. Okay, so the daughters of Tzlofchad, the Benot Tzlofchad of the Menasite family, son of Hefer, son of Gilad, son of Machir, son of Menashe, son of Yosef, Joseph, came forward. So in Hebrew, it's Vatikravna. They came close, literally came close. Benot Tzlofchad, ben Hefer, ben Gilad, ben Machir, ben Menashe, lemishpachot Menashe, ben Yosef. The Ele Shemot Benotav. And these are the names of the daughters of Tzlofchad, Machla, Noah, Chagla, Milcah, and Tirzah. And in fact, I know some people who do name their daughters after at least one of the daughters of Tzlofchad, Noah, not to be confused with Noach. So there are a few things in this verse. Number one is as I said, they came close, and that sort of evokes Korban, and one also hears resonance of the sons of Aaron coming close to offer their strange fire. So whatever, it's just an interesting concept that they came close. And to me, that already shows courage on their part. And we'll see in a minute why, like, what are they coming close to? And the other thing about this verse is there are 5 male names and 5 female names. So we're at least in the first verse, we're stepping forward into a field that has a balance of femaleness and maleness. But then let's see what happens in the second verse to that balance. So they came close, and then they stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the chieftains, and the whole assembly at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and they said, so in Hebrew, "V'ta'amodna lifnei Moshe v'lifnei Eleazar hakohen v'lifnei hanesiim v'kol ha'edah petach ohel moed lemor." So first, the feminine plural of they stood, and who did they stand before? Oh my God, so many men, right? Moses, Aaron's son Eleazar, the chieftains, the whole assembly. One can, at least I wonder if the whole assembly means that we're women there or not, and I don't know. And then at the entrance of the tent of meeting, so there's a sense of perhaps the divine presence was also there. So again, tremendous courage on the part of these 5 sisters. And then they make their claim in the third verse. Our father died in the wilderness. He was not one of the faction, Korach's faction, right, which banded together against the Lord and against Moshe, of course, and Aaron, but died for his own sin. So their father died for his own sin. That's a really interesting concept, and he has left no sons. So Avinu met b'midbar, v'hu lo haya b'toch ha'edah hano'adim al Adonai ba'adat Korach, ki b'chet omet uvanim lo haya lo. So it's so important, I think the rhetoric here on the part of the sisters is brilliant. So the first thing they get out of the way is, Moshe, we're not a threat to you. We're not, our father wasn't part of that rebel faction. This is not designed to undermine you. Our father was relatively innocent. Everyone dies for a sin, but this was not for a collective sin. Or in the Torah, and then later in rabbinic literature, death and sinfulness are connected, but this was not like huge sin. It's only his own individual sins, right? So that they had to get that out of the way so that their claim could be taken seriously. So they're not, the way they state their case, the first thing they say is, we're not a threat to you, Moshe. Our father was not a threat to you. Okay, so then they got that out of the way. Now let's move into what their claim is. Let not our father's name be lost to his clan, just because he had no son. Give us a holding among our father's kinsmen. So they're doing this for their father, or at least that's how they're framing it, right? Let not our father's name be lost. Lama yigara. Sorry, I'm just straining a little bit to see the vowels. Shem Avinu mitoch mishpachto ki ein lo ben. Tinalanu, give us. And that's like a very basic kind of phraseology in the Torah, like give us food, give us water, give us that girl, right? Give us, we want, give us achuzah, holding, betoch achei avinu, amongst the brothers of our father. So then what does Moshe do? In verse 5, Moses brought their case before the Lord. But the phrase here mirrors what they did. Vayakrev Moshe et mishpatan lifnei Adonai. So Moshe brings close their case to God. The way they came close, Moshe brings close, again, their claim before God, or their case. Okay, 6. So Moshe obviously doesn't know how to answer. And as I said last night, for those of you who were in services, this is one of 4 cases in the Torah that Moses does not know how to answer. So he's like, he just doesn't know, he doesn't have the tools to address this, right? This is outside his expertise. And so he appeals to God. And what does God say? And I just love this. The plea of Tzlofchad's daughter is just. And in Hebrew, it's Ken benot Tzlofchad dovrot. So Aviva Zornberg, the wonderful literary scholar of the Bible, says that we can translate Cain here as God like delighting in the words, like, yes, the daughters of Tzlofchad are speaking. Yes, they're speaking right and justly and well, and God is delighted. And why? Because the whole book of Numbers is about the Israelites complaining and saying we want to go back to Egypt and rebelling, and they're not on board with the project, right? Here, the daughters of Tzlofchad are on board with just the simple fact of going forward, right, in God's project. Titen lahem achuzat nachala b'toch achei avihem. You should give them a hereditary holding among their father's kinsmen. Ve'ha'avarta et nachalat avihen lahen, and transfer. So that word is interesting because it'll be echoed in the next piece of the Torah in Moshe's transition, right? Standing on Har Averim, and is it Aviram? I forget exactly. We'll see. Standing on that mountain of transition and the act of transmission. V'ha'avarta et nachalat avihen lahen. Transfer their father's share to them. Pass it over to them. And then further, so that's God's decision here. You should do exactly what they're asking. And then further, Ve'el b'nei Yisrael to daber le'mor, and speak to the Israelites and tell them, Ish ki yamut uvein ein lo, a man that dies has no son. And again, that root is appearing. V'ha'avartem et nachalato levito. You shall transfer his property to his daughter. So this has become law. It's not just for them. It's a whole systemic change. So they come forward with their individual plea, and it's become a law for all the Israelites. Now, you might think, big deal, right? There are no sons, a daughter gets it, right? We're still in the patriarchy, right? Everybody, we're not leaving the patriarchy here, but within that system of patriarchy, this is an improvement. So, that may not be very satisfying. I don't know. Maybe we'll see some texts that are more inspiring on that front. And yet, I think it takes great courage to just stand up and have a system shift, right? They've destabilized the system and shifted it in their direction and in their interest and in the interest of Bnei Israel. Okay, I've said a lot. There's a lot more text to do, but I'm going to take questions and comments, stop share. And if you recall, please keep your comments short, to the point. And if you can directly address a piece of text, that would be wonderful. Okay, everybody, great to see you. And I also want to encourage people who've never spoken in this room. I'd love to hear from you. You've never spoken before in this room and would like to do so today. Okay, Beth, take it away.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I find this text so fascinating. The multiple reflections of patriarchy in here, explaining the heritage of these women, they're the daughters and granddaughters and great-granddaughters, et cetera, of these men. And then talking about how they're standing in front of this assembly of men. And it's so interesting that they're so outnumbered by all these males. Back when I was still working, I loved those odds. I loved being outnumbered.
Really?
Yes, yes. Because being the only woman in the room or being outnumbered by men actually gives a tactical and emotional advantage. There's an inhibiting effect on the people doing the outnumbering. There really is. I experienced this personally over and over and over during my career. But what's so fascinating about this is that, and God's pleasure in them, Cain benot Zilchachad, it's like there's this multiple justification of them, and it's that repeated justification of them that so reflects the patriarchal setting. They didn't need any justification. They were making a very legitimate claim. And yet whoever wrote our text here justified and justified and justified that these women were in the right, and they explain it over and over and over in multiple ways. And as a modern woman, I find it almost comical because from my perspective, it's completely unnecessary.
It's interesting because I see what they're doing as an act, like as a brilliant act of rhetoric, in a sense is they know how to frame their claim in the context of patriarchy so they get listened to. Like, why should our father's name, be gone? Like why, and they start with their father's interest and then they move it to theirs. But let's look, Beth, you're making me think of there's this other text that's really kind of radical from the 3rd century that I want to look at briefly, especially since I don't see any other hands up yet. So let's screen share again. If I can find, I see another. Jill, I'm going to get to you in a minute. So I want to put another text on the table from the Sifrei that I just studied with my chavruta this morning, Rabbi Sharon Konanisfeld, and we were kind of kvelling about how radical it was. So let me find it. I missed it. Hold on. Here. Okay. So this is what this 3rd century Midrash says. When the daughters of Tzlofchad heard that the land was to be apportioned to the tribes and not to females, they gathered together to take counsel, saying, not as the mercies of flesh and blood are the mercies of the Lord, right? Lo kerachmei ben, what is this? Flesh and blood. Basar v'dam, rachmei hamakom. The mercies of flesh and blood are greater for males than for females. So in other words, people privilege men. Not so the mercies of he who spoke and brought the world into being. Not so for God. His mercies are for males and females equally. His mercies are for all. And then they have a proof text. The Lord is good to all, and his mercies are upon all of his creations. Oh my God. 3rd century text that says, human beings, they operate within the system of patriarchy. God, not so much. So we could say, at least it's a hopeful statement, that human beings are heading in the direction of divine consciousness. If we are indeed heading away from the patriarchy, which I'm not always sure about. Okay, I'm going to stop my share and take some other text. But I love, Beth, that you said that when there are more men in the room, that's actually an inhibiting factor for the men, which is not something I've actually ever noticed, but I'm going to start looking out for that. So thank you. Okay, Jill and then Joe.
Okay, hi everybody.
Hi, can you turn on your video?
Yes, I can.
Great.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Yeah, so I agree with your assessment, Rabbi, in that it was a brilliant argument for that time. And it just made me think of Justice Ginsburg and the way that she was able to make some kind of landmark women's rights argument was to basically try a men's rights case, basically, to say that it shouldn't, I can't remember the exact case, but, shouldn't all people be able, maybe it was custody. I can't remember what it was.
Your audio is a little, I'm not hearing everything. Your audio is great. You want to try again? Justice Ginsburg.
Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Justice Ginsburg basically kind of came into a women's rights argument kind of sideways by doing a men's rights case that got the women the rights that they needed. And I can't remember the details of it, but it feels very much like this case in the Torah.
Yeah, it's like, I was reading and listening to Aviva Zornberg, and in fact, the lecture that I listened to is cited on the source sheet if you want to listen to it. And she talked about like walking into a force field, and you sort of have to, I'm adding this, she didn't say this, but you also, I found you have to like sort of assess like the field of factors and the forces, kind of acknowledge them before you take the step. So yeah, thank you for that, Joe. Okay, Joe St. George.
I'm sorry. Shabbat shalom. Thank you.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, I wanted to just point out that this is not the first time that some sisters spoke out about their inheritance. In Genesis chapter 31, verses 14, in the conversation by Rachel and Leah, Rachel and Leah answered to their father or to their to the men at that time, and they said, "Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our
Beautiful.
father's house?
Beautiful,
Are
Jo.
we not counted him strangers?"
Beautiful.
So they claimed it back then. I think what we don't see is a direct prophetic message from God through a prophet telling us, confirming that at that time. But they owned their inheritance, and sisters were stepping up back then, have always and will always own their equality in God as rightful heirs of being a part, being images of God, just like it says in Genesis, male and female created him, he, them, in the image of God. So we've been claiming ours. We just, I think, it's just been kind of overlooked, but we got to keep it up.
Jo, such powerful words. Thank you so much. Ken Dovera Jo. Jo speaks yes, rightly. And I want to add that there's a beautiful Rashi, and if we have time, we'll look at it, but that talks about their lineage and talks about why Menashe, their ancestor Menashe is mentioned twice in the first verse, and says Menashe is descended from Joseph, and Joseph is the one who asked for his bones to be taken to the promised land. So it's like they're talking about forces. There are two forces in the Torah, right? In this whole sort of wilderness going to the promised land trajectory. One is let's go back to Egypt, and the other is let's go forward. And when a previous generation says let's go forward, like Rachel did, right, which is Joseph's mother, let's go forward or give us inheritance, that reverberates down the generations, right? And I love that idea because it's like what we do, whether we have physical children or students or whoever we deal with in our lives, that somehow reverberates down the generations. But we don't know it because it happens 10 generations later or 5 generations later. So that's a really powerful concept, Jo. Thank you so much. Okay, so 9:22, we're going to do 5 minutes of comments and do some more text. Let's see. So we had, we're going to do Asher Chaim, Jay. Oh no, I'm sorry. I saw David first. David, Asher Chaim, Jay, Roberta, and then I'm going to take other comments later.
Hi, this story makes me think of issues we face today, and I don't really mean to judge the individuals in the story or the conclusion, because we don't really know enough. But there's debate about whether Korach and his family and group deserved their punishment, or even whether they could have been right. And that's one, in modern terms, that's one social issue. Another one is women's rights, and one might describe the argument as throwing one issue under the bus, or in this case, allowing it to be swallowed under the earth for the sake of another one.
Right. So you distance yourself for who's like unsavory in the minds of the power that you're addressing in order to sort of make your case. You're right. That's what they did. They threw Korach under the bus in a sense. All right. I think we said Asher Chaim next.
A wonderful lesson from silence of Moshe. So important these days, where everyone is polarized and everyone has an opinion and everyone is beating with cudgels. And the 3 most important words that we don't use often enough: I don't know. Moshe listens and silently brings their case in the presence of God, rather than saying, I'm the leader, I have to have an immediate answer. A little Musar, Dibarti.
Beautiful. Thank you, Asher Chaim. Absolutely. And his humility goes a long way. And in my studying this morning with my chavruta, who's here, Rabbi Sharon Cohn Anisfeld, there's a text that says that those who run after glory don't ultimately get glory, and those who don't run after glory ultimately do get glory. And, you know, we're now studying the 5 books of Moses because he was, according to the Torah, the most humble man on earth, which is kind of funny because my husband always says, well, if he wrote the Torah and he wrote that, how humble could he be? Right. So, but I guess God dictated that line. Okay. Jay.
I'm going to try to see if I can articulate this. In reflecting on Beth's comment, which would appear at first part to be counterintuitive, I'm wondering if it has to do something with dominant authority. That is to say, in situations where the kind of scene that Beth is describing is somehow in the realm of science, engineering, hard sciences, where there is an appeal to authority, which is scientific, the voice of even a singular woman expressed suddenly will depress the patriarchal dominance, which is counter to, in some ways, if you think about it, real scientific legitimacy. On the other hand, in politics, soft sciences, like we see in academia, whatever, there's not that appeal to authority. Similarly, God...
Wait, Jay, I'm not understanding why the appeal to the authority will soften the patriarchy in these...
Because they realize there is another test here. Okay, when a woman speaks up in a scientific or hard science or engineering, there's an empirical test, and suddenly the gushpanka of patriarchy there's a conflict. Similarly, in here, the ultimate appeal is God, and so there's a recognition by Moshe, in fact, that this is out of my realm. There's a whole other authority issue here, and I'll appeal to that. Similarly, in the kind of thing I think Beth was describing, there is suddenly a realization that it's not just about patriarchy. There is an independent authority, gushpanka, or legitimacy making here that's beyond patriarchy.
Interesting. So is there something else we can appeal to? And you're saying that characterizes the hard sciences, but perhaps not other fields, like, for instance, the Jewish world.
Or most political world, yeah.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to do, as promised, a few more texts, and I'll come back to the people who have raised their hands. And unfortunately, I can't take people who've already spoken because I want to get more voices on the table. Okay, so I'm going to screen share. Aha, I found it. Amazing. Okay, so we did the Sifrei. I think I talked about the Rashi, so we're not going to go over that again. I love this one. So this is Bamidbar Rabbah. The daughters of Slofchad came forward. This was greatness for them and greatness for their father. Greatness also for Machir as well as for Yosef, that such women came forth for them. So when you do something in your generation, you imbue greatness to past generations, right? So I love how that works. And also pave the way for future generations. They were wise and righteous women. What was their wisdom? They spoke at the appropriate moment, for Moses was engaged upon the subject of inheritances. So what was going on right before this is a census. So I'm not exactly sure why this text makes that claim, but I think more importantly is the theme of timing. Timing is so crucial in the world, in life, for human beings, but it's also crucial, as far as I can see at the moment, in terms of women and how they act in the Torah. If you think about Miriam and how she came forward at just the right moment to save Moshe's life when the daughter of Pharaoh was there. She had just opened the basket, taken from the reeds by the Nile River. Or Esther, who, has, strategizes so that she plans these 3 feasts, right, for Achashverosh. And finally, the last one, she finally sort of comes out of the closet as a Jew, right? So these, these women and timing, or the way that Rebecca steps in either for good or for bad when Isaac is about to give Esav, the oldest, the blessing, and intervenes so that her preferred son, her, the youngest, Jacob, can get the blessing. So, timing is so crucial. Like, when do you step in, make your claim? So there's how you make your claim and when you make your claim. So I wanted to put that on the table. Okay, I'm going to take a few more comments, and then we're going to look at Moshe. So I'm going to stop share. Okay, so again, I'm going to ask people if you could keep your comments as concise and as brief as possible so we can hear as many voices as possible, because I want to get to one last very juicy text. Okay, so we have Barbara, Roberta, Nehemiah, and David.
Shabbat Shalom. So good to see everyone today. Can you see me? I hope you can. It's a little dark.
You're a little dark. I'm listening. I'm just getting a charging cord. So just continue, Barbara.
Great, wonderful. I love all of these texts, and it certainly brings up so many contemporary issues. I'll just say two things quickly. Asher Chaim, when you said people are beating things with cudgels, which I thought was very interesting in our contemporary time. And then Diane, when you're talking about timing, and really the question is, who gets to decide the timing? For women, is it only okay to speak when it's the right time? And for men, can they just keep hitting with cudgels to be heard? I do have that master's in women's studies, and I sometimes bring it out, but I don't bring it too often anymore. But the thing is, and clearly in the Bible, it's that, of course, what Joe said about, just continuing to keep speaking and bringing things to attention really seems to apply to everyone now, whether it's the right time or not. And I feel like when we step back, I think when we step back and we don't push forward, yes, sometimes we get a reward. When we're looking for glory, we don't. I've certainly had that experience in my music career.
So Barbara, so it's interesting, making me think that the Daughters of Tzlachad are an amazing sort of combination of audacity and restraint, right? And it's like, it's really tricky and it's really political. And I can't imagine, I can't imagine that timing is not an issue for men as well, but I'm curious what other people think. Barbara, okay, one more point and we're moving on.
I'll be quick. So as women, do we not even notice, because of how we're socialized, that we're waiting for the right time?
Interesting. That's really, the difference in terms of time, like the approach to time in terms of power is fascinating. Okay, Barbara, I'm gonna move on. Okay, Roberta.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I'm looking at where we are in the whole journey, right, to the promised land, and it seems like what these daughters, among everything that people have said, which is already amazing, but they are showing us the way to a new view of possession. And of course, it comes through women, because correcting our relationship to possession, I think, has to come from the ones who've been dispossessed, because they understand how it's not been working, and they understand how it's in the interest of the whole collective, whether it's the globe, the climate, Jews and Palestinians, African Americans and white identified people. It's like the people who have been dispossessed understand how to correct, and that's what they're modeling. And just again, as I think so many of us know, that this is the heart of Kabbalah, that the unification of the masculine and the feminine, right? By really raising the voice of the feminine is what's going to change our relationship, so that then we know how to occupy this land that we have rejected and scared a few weeks earlier in the story. So
Thank
it's
you.
beautiful. Thank you.
And I love the idea of the daughters of Slochad are such a beautiful example of those who are not allowed in the circle stepping into the circle. But if you're not allowed in the circle, can you step into the circle? So it's a troubling question, right? And it takes great courage, but I don't want to presume that those who aren't stepping into the circle are doing it for lack of courage. Like when is it possible? When isn't it possible? Okay, so here's the lineup. And again, I'm going to ask everybody to be as quick as possible. Nehemiah, David, Sharon, Alana, Lars, and then no more hands because we don't have time. I want to do one more text. Nehemiah.
Shabbat Shalom, holy community. Beautiful words. I'm taking down symbolically my head down to the women for their prophetic wisdom of timing. Think about Miriam for a brother. Think about Rebecca, that she knows exactly the timing when Esau will come and everything finish exactly in time.
Okay, Tanya, I'm sorry, as brief as possible. 1 point.
Okay, so the women basically take care of their children, like my sister-in-law. They don't care much how much land they'll get. They want to make sure that their children will have, the grandchildren. And the last thing I want to say is that Moses does exactly what the other realized being that I know. It takes time, they do the same. You ask a question, the mind doesn't know the answer. It go either to the Mishkan or to the Mishkan in the heart. They do it when you ask them a tough question, realized being, and they don't answer straight away. They take a minute, then they ask with complete definition because God told them from inside or from the Mishkan. Yes, women should be from now on.
Great. So I want to take a little bit of an issue of defining women as only caring about their children. I don't have a discussion about it right now, but I think that women need to define their own concerns. I'm going to go on. I'm sorry. We can debate this, and I can't wait to debate it with you. Okay, Alana, David, Sharon, Lars, and then we're doing one more text. Go ahead. And Amy, I'm hoping to get to you, Amy. I really want to hear what you have to say. Go ahead, Alana.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom. So one of the pieces of this that's jumping out to me is this is a story of these 5 women work together collectively. It's a collective action. Beautiful. And comparing them to other stories of siblings in the Torah who are acting against each other. This feels like perhaps the first story of siblings out of love and mutual interest, cooperatively work together, and they affect such powerful change.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And I just want to add to this as just kind of a midrashic resonance here that feels like some kind of doorway, thinking about your comment, Rabbi Diane, about the 5 books of Moshe and the 5 sisters. So, yeah, like what's the 5 here? And what are the 5 books of these sisters? Or what is it that is the opening?
Oh, very evocative. I don't know the answer, but love that idea in the Zoom room. Okay, Sharon.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Well, I just want to say, as this conversation is going on, I'm feeling more and more torn between what feel like 2 different readings of Benot Tzlachad emerging, and it's probably both, but and it sort of goes back to what you were saying about audacity and restraint, but for me also sort of strategy and sincerity. So there's one reading which has them being very strategic in their rhetoric and sort of framing it in terms of the patriarchy, like sort of like the midwives and the way they were strategic in their rhetoric with Paro, and and throwing Korach under the bus and all of that whole line of reading. Yeah. And then there's this other line of reading which comes out of a real sincerity, which is they really were not just asking for themselves. They really were seeing themselves in a larger lineage, you know, both looking back and looking forward. And, you know, in terms of the verse that you quoted about, you know, those who seek kavod for themselves, kavod flees from them. And they really weren't just doing that. And are rewarded with their own name. You know, they're concerned for their father's name, and they're rewarded with their own names being remembered and sort of taking their place in the larger story. So it feels like we're sort of
toggling between those two.
Toggling between those two readings, and each is compelling in its own way. But I'm feeling drawn to also making sure we lift up the sincerity alongside the strategy.
Absolutely. And one question I have for them and also for myself, does strategy preclude sincerity? Because my experience is that strategy is often vital and doesn't necessarily make the sincere concern and claim sort of go away.
Right. No, I think we have to hold,
somehow
we have to hold both, but their intention with each other. Yeah.
Okay, David, and then Lars. I'm going to do one more text, and then Amy, I hope I'm going to get to you too.
Oh, you hear me?
Yeah.
Am I there? Hi. Shabbat Shalom. The timing. It makes perfect sense to me, more in a literal way. We just have come through Karak. We've just come through wars. We've come through now a plague with 24,000 people died. There's a lot of death. God has meted out justice in a pretty brutal way, and presumably there's going to be a lot of widows and there's going to be a lot of orphans. And I think part of the taking the census was who's left, like who's you know, and how do we deal with the aftermath of all this stuff. So it kind of makes sense to me in a lot of ways that this story comes in here, because it's going to present, you know, a lot of, it's an issue that a lot of the Israelite community is going to have to deal with. So
so it's a real moment of transitioning and reckoning, and who are the survivors, but they're dealing with that sort of uncertainty, instability, and anxiety by looking forward.
Right. And I do have one quick question. I have a picture. I have a picture to that everybody will appreciate, to Beth's point earlier, that I'd really like to put in the chat. If we could open the chat for 1 second, I'll post it.
Sure. Ari, can you open the chat, please? Thank you. Sure. Thank you so much, David. And I think that's really important context. I appreciate it. Thank you. Lars. Hi, Lars. Shabbat Shalom. Great to see you.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. I really enjoy this. I love the story. I love the way you've brought it forward. From my women's studies background, the way I framed it was within second wave feminism, working within the system to change the system.
Yeah.
And at the same time, as I say this, I also have to say I have a little bit of a response to the notion of time and knowing when the right time is. And this goes directly to Martin Luther King. And, you know, for years, we Black folks have been told to wait for the right time. This isn't your time. This isn't yet. And really what wait, to quote, and I'll just quote Martin Luther King here, but we know that this wait has almost meant never. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurors that justice too long delayed is justice denied. And so I do get a little concerned when we talk about when is the right time, because there seems never to be the right time, particularly for Black folks to.
Lars, it's such a powerful challenge. Thank you. First, I just want to acknowledge it. When I was at the Jewish Theological Seminary from 89 to 95, that's the language people pulled when talking about admitting gay people into rabbinical school. It's not time, it's not time, it's not time. So I'm completely with you on that. And I wonder, or I still think that timing, not so much the right time. Well, I don't know. I don't know how to phrase it, but when do you step in? When do you step in, even when everyone else is telling you to wait? Is that still a question? So I'm still curious about how timing figures into the audacity that's required to get justice. I'm just wondering out loud with you, Lars, but thank you. All right, I'm going to give up the other text because it's actually a different, you can look at my source sheet. It's a different topic. I mean, it's totally related. It's the same topic. It's Moshe on the mountain, but I think I want to hear the voices on the table, and we only have 5 minutes left. So, Amy, you've been waiting so patiently. I don't know if we can see you. That would be nice. And if not, we'll just hear your voice. And then Jen.
I just want to make 3 super quick points. First of all, what did the father die of? Rashi believes it is because he was the wood bearer who collected wood on Shabbat and was killed for it to demonstrate how holy Shabbat was. Another is that he tried to sneak into Israel before the spies had. But Rabbi Trugman does the orchard, I can't really show you, does the Orchard of Delights. And he says, indeed, the notion that the daughters of Zilpah took courage from Pinchas, that's why it occurs in Pinchas, and makes sense because several similarities between the 2 stories. In both cases, no one else knew what to do, and an injustice seemed to be taking place. Furthermore, both Pinchas and the daughters had the courage to approach Moses with their plans so that a difficult problem could be resolved. And finally, these women, like Pinchas, were outsiders, an individual who would not have received his paternal inheritance had he not taken action. To bring it into today, the letter at the end of the word case in this is nun, which is larger, and it only occurs a few times in the Torah when the letter is larger. In this case, nun is 50. In our case, it alludes to the 50 gates of Bina, the 50 distinct ascending levels of consciousness and Bina. And I think I wanted to ask that we dedicate our class and learning and our worship later today to the 50 Jews who were buried underneath the rubble in Surfside.
Thank you, Amy. You said a lot. I'd love to dedicate this to the people that were killed in Surfside. Absolutely. I also want to pick up. There's a comment I wanted to make before that I forgot to make about this idea of sinfulness and how they need to kind of get that out of the way so that they can lay their claim forward. And I think that this also might relate to Laura's point. It's like, when are we good enough to step forward? When is like our idea of sinfulness, which is maybe not being good enough or somehow feeling bad about ourselves, prevent us from approaching power and speaking truth to power? When does that notion have us wait unnecessarily? So another question for the group. Jen.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Thank you, as always, for such a scintillating discussion. I want to pick up on a thread from Rabbi Sharon Cohen Anasfeld and also from something that Jill said earlier as well. And
I love this weaving of threads. Go ahead.
And as I do the weaving, I have to say, when I was a first-year student in college 25 plus years ago, Rabbi Sharon Cohen Anasfeld was my rabbi at Tufts. And so it brings me a special deep pleasure to be in conversation with her this morning and you, and to know that you guys are chavrutas. It's like, woo, blows my mind, really fun. So hi, Rabbi Sharon. I remember sitting in the Women's Center with you, Rabbi Sharon, and being really blown away by what you told me then. So what Sharon was talking about was the tension between sincerity on the one hand and strategy on the other hand. And what Jill said about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, using strategy for the purpose of sincerity. And I just thought to myself, when I heard you, Rabbi Sharon, talk about these things as intention with one another, it really struck me that what if our work is to have the strategy be in service of our sincere aims? And that maybe one reason why RBG became so notorious is because she uniquely knew how to do that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Wow, I'm just kind of reeling from the coming together of worlds and concepts and consciousness and points of view. And I was going to say, I wish we were all in one room together, but we actually are in one room together. So my blessing for all of us is that the daughters of Tzlofchad should inspire us to come forward and speak on behalf of our communities and our own sincere and vital claims. And I'll see you all at services. Shabbat Shalom.